Hello and welcome to Fire Headlines, where we discuss the hottest topics in fire service news. I'm your host, Samantha Didion, and joining me on the panel today is Chief Ken Kengna. Our topic this week is possible solutions to EMS shortages across the U.S. An article shared in the Daily Dispatch talks about Cincinnati State expanding its EMT and paramedic program to address the national shortage of EMS personnel. The details of this can be found in the article in the show notes of this episode, but Ken, I kind of want to focus more on the shortage we're seeing across the United States. And I want your insights on how do you think hands-on experience in programs like the one Cincinnati State has helps shape the confidence and readiness of new EMTs and paramedics entering this high-pressure field?
I'll use my own experience as sort of just an example of why I think hands-on experience makes a difference. And we can talk a little bit more about some of the other pieces of this. But when I was young and getting interested in the fire service, I was focused on the fire service. That was what I was interested in. And it became apparent very quickly that if I went the EMS track, either EMT and paramedic, that I had a better chance of getting into the fire department, which was my ultimate goal. It wasn't EMS. That wasn't my goal. That wasn't in my head something that I even really thought I could do. Not so much wanted to do, but could do. And it was the hands-on experience that I got in the training when it was like, I can do this. Wow, not only can I do this, I like this. It takes it from this abstract concept of what you see on television, which could not be less accurate, to what you're being told by people, which is, their experience, to your experience. And it makes it real. It makes it more accessible. And I think it gets people energized. It did for me. I was like, the light went on. I'm like, I actually really like this. And I was young at the time. I mean, in high school, just getting out of high school at the time. So I didn't know which end was up, Not that I do now, but I certainly didn't know which end was up. But it really focused me on this is fascinating.
You sound very enthused about this, obviously. And that really just makes me wonder if you're so excited about it, I can't imagine you're the only one. What are some of your ideas on why the nation is facing this shortage?
Um, well, I'll use the area where I grew up and ended up serving the vast majority of my career. I lived in a large metropolitan center. The vast majority of the schools were tracking, kids, all of us, to college prep. In junior high, in grammar school, there was competition about which college prep school you were going to go to. I mean, it was a thing. When I was, 14, thinking about which high school I was going to go to, so I could think about what college I was going to. I was tracking that way. So I wasn't even being exposed to there are other things you can do that are fulfilling and enjoyment and give you a wonderful, enjoyable career doing something that matters. I wasn't being exposed to it. I was fortunate to be exposed to it. Now I ended up continuing on and going, getting my college degree and my graduate study. I ended up doing all of that, but I did it after already pursuing a career in EMS and in the fire service. And I remember distinctly, and this is not all that long ago, we were looking to get into one of the career fairs at one of the local high schools. And the person we were speaking to at the high school said, yeah, you can come. These kids are not going to be interested in the fire department. And I thought, how could how can that be? How is it possible that that is in fact the case? And I completely dismissed it as impossible. It was not impossible. It was quite clear that the youth that were there that day were tracking towards a four-year degree. They were focused on technology. They were focused on a professional career path, and it was not EMS, fire service, or the trades in any way. So I think that that's part of it. I think there is this tendency to be drawn into that. This is a whole topic of conversation. Mike Rowe, who you probably have heard about, has railed against not everybody needs to get a four-year degree. Without getting into that, I would say that I think that exposing, young kids to the entire range of opportunities so that they can find something that fits for them, is important. The Boy Scouts of America have the Explorer program, and that Explorer program we know is instrumental in getting people interested in careers at a young and exposing them to trades and things that they might not otherwise see. And those are the kinds of things I think that really help feed the industry and would keep kids coming towards EMS into the fire service.
Everyone's taught these professional paths you're supposed to take, go to college, get your master's, and then do this, X, Y, and Z. But college really isn't for everyone. If it's been said once, it's been said 1,000 times. It's not for everyone. And we do need people in these other jobs that don't require a 4-year degree and that they can get started with, sometimes volunteering while still in high school. So I think just that comes down to probably some community engagement within fire departments. Don't let your community forget about you. Make sure you know that, or they know that you're there. And that inspires kids probably. Actually, from some of the stories I heard in my previous fire department, that's how many of them got into the fire service, is because they had typically a family member, and that was how they learned about the avenue to become a firefighter. So yeah, just making that more prevalent in kids' lives, and even from an early age. Well, actually, I think let me know what your thoughts on this are. But I feel like at a young age, kids are really introduced to their first responders around their community. You do the smokehouse when you're young, you go do all the firehouse tours. Then once you hit that like middle school, high school age, I feel like we don't see the fire department anymore at our schools. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's funny. I was actually just thinking about this because we were having a conversation about this. I want to say it's maybe 10 years ago. And we were talking about how different things are today versus how they were when we got interested in the fire service. When I got interested in the fire service, the chances, if you walked by a fire station, the chances of the doors being up and people being out was very good. In a post 9/11 world, doors are down, doors are locked, you got to knock, you got to go through the more secure. It's much more off-putting for the community. It's not even as welcoming and as an accepting. It's been a thing of mine to make sure that the community understands the fire department, it's yours. It belongs to you. We're part of the community. We belong to you. The fire engines belong to you. We're here for you, all that other kind of stuff. But it's tough when the doors are down and it's like security, we got to, be careful. I think that has had a bit of an impact. I think we're less accessible from a fire safety and education standpoint. One thing we know for sure is that if we're trying to make sure that kids know what happens if if their clothes catch on fire, through stop, drop, and roll, or to prevent fires and young kids from playing with fire and all that other stuff, we get them as young as we possibly can because that's when they're doing the kinds of things we have maybe left a little bit of a gap in those teenage years. We don't have exposure to kids during the teenage years. I think it's probably for two reasons. One, when we're teenagers, we're like, I'm cool. I got my thing. It's football and whatever else I'm, doing that kind of stuff. So it's maybe a little bit harder group to reach. But I think you're onto something. I think that if we're going to address this, because we're seeing this is not an isolated trend, seeing a reduction in people coming into the fire service, which is as wonderful a profession today as it was when I started a gazillion years ago. It is absolutely just as wonderful, and I would advocate for it. I'd do it all over again for sure. I don't think kids are recognizing it and seeing it and being exposed to it during those years when they're trying to make career decisions about what do I want to do with my life.
Mm-hmm. And at least at my high school, something that we saw a lot is the military. They'd come in with their pull-up bar and have you do the pull-up challenges. And a lot of people I graduated with went into the military and stuff like that. And I would bet it's because that they were there almost every lunchtime, at least once a week. And so maybe the fire service doing something like that can bring more awareness to that profession. But I don't want to just talk about community engagement this whole time. So we have our EMS personnel who are with the fire department. Why would they be leaving? Why is the fire service facing a retention issue?
It's interesting. I don't know. I don't know that we face a retention issue with firefighters. Once we have you as a firefighter, I don't think we have retention issues there. I think on the EMS side, before you're an EMT or paramedic firefighter, I think we have a retention issue on the EMS side. That I do believe, and I have actually seen that firsthand. And it's
When you
just
say that, do you mean like the EMS working like for hospitals or with fire departments?
both. So
Okay.
there's and systems vary widely throughout the world and certainly throughout the United States. Um, some ambulance services, EMS services, are hospital-based systems, like you just referenced. Some of those are private, like we see in a lot of areas of California, whether it's AMR or one of the larger companies are private. So they're not firefighters, they're paramedics and or EMTs. But a lot of fire departments also have EMS programs, differentiating between two categories here. Some have EMS only programs where they have an ambulance and the people that work on those ambulances are EMTs and paramedics, but they are not firefighters. The ambulance says fire department, but they're not firefighters. So they never get a chance. They don't get off the box. They don't ever stop running EMS calls. And in some busy systems, the burnout can be very high. And if your goal is fire service and your goal is something you can sustain throughout your life, that EMS only profession is challenging, and it's tough to retain people in those positions long term. It's few and far between where people will work in the private ambulance sector or an EMS only sector running emergency medical calls like that in a lot of places as a full-time career for their entire lives. It's emotionally taxing, it's physically taxing, as we already talked about. The shifts can be very long. And so I think we do see retention there, or retention issues there for sure.
So this brings me to my next question I have for you. How do you see the collaboration between EMT programs and fire departments impacting the future of both fields, especially in terms of cross-training and career growth?
We're the fire department, right? It's this fire headlines. We're the Western Fire Chiefs. The vast majority of what we do, the vast majority of what we oversee is response to emergency medical calls and a wide variety of other types of emergencies other than fire, right?
Mhm.
I think we need to fully embrace this and partner with our educational institutions like Cincinnati State, partner with educational institutions like our community colleges, so that we are present in those environments through providing instructors and access for internships, and really being present at a time when people are making career decisions about what they want to do, and let them know that the door is open and available to them. The younger kids are, when we start that conversation, the better off we are. In Santa Clara County, there was and all the vocational programs have been consolidated into a specific location for a bunch of the high schools. Okay. But there's vocational opportunities there for EMS, law enforcement, welding, auto, all those other kinds of things. And it's just access and exposure to demystify what it actually is. And the first time I had the opportunity to see it, I was blown away at how professional it was and how these kids knew this is what I want to do. I want to do, and it's like the light went on early. I think it's through supporting those kinds of programs, whether the local fire chiefs association supports the program by providing training, equipment, financial resources, whatever. I think that's one thing that would certainly address the issue, to provide career guidance and mentoring so that, kids have a good role model and somebody they can talk to in the industry to answer questions about what do I want to do, or all of those kinds of things I think are absolutely critical.
So in the article, Cincinnati states that there's a shortage of EMT applicants. Do you think that there's an opportunity for EMS roles to evolve in a way that appeal to a wider range of people?
I would argue that the EMS role has evolved substantially. I am when
Agree with that, actually. I would agree
when
with
I
that.
when I think back to my early training and my early exposure and what I was doing as both an EMT and a paramedic right out of school, and what I did, when I was filling that role versus what EMTs and paramedics are doing today, whether that's scope of practice, which is much, much wider than it ever was before, opportunities that didn't necessarily exist before to function as more than just, EMT private or EMT fire department. There's a lot more opportunities there. I think it is evolving. And I would argue that I think exposure to that and understanding that is critical. Because if people are seeing, EMS in this very narrow lens of, well, you're either, on an ambulance or you're working for the fire department, you're missing a lot of other opportunities and other things that you can do that are fulfilling, that are fun, that are engaging, add all the adjectives you want, they are there. I don't think the EMS is going to evolve would evolve reactively to attract more people into it. But I think it's important that as EMS evolves, we continue to share that so that people understand that there's much more there. I will tell you, I think every fire chief listening to this will agree. An EMS program is probably one of the single best feeders that you have for a fire service organization for developing leadership. As an EMS provider, whether you're an EMT or paramedic, as you develop those skills, you develop scene control, you develop the ability to make decisions, you develop the ability to direct others in critical moments. It comes through when we test and evaluate. We see how those skills mature people into leadership positions very early. It is probably one of the best opportunities for growth for somebody who wants to be a supervisor, whether that's, in the fire department or anywhere, frankly, because you develop this ability that I think it's got a lot of transportability.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to add on this topic before we wrap up today?
I remember the moment, and I think I said this earlier, but I'm going to say it again for emphasis. I remember the moment when I realized that I love doing EMS. It was twofold. One, I was surprised that I could because it seemed hard. And I loved it that the opportunity presented itself, that it was the vast majority of what we got to do. So I was involved in all the calls we went to. There was no, standing back and waiting. I was like, no, I'm in the mix. For young kids today, if you want to be in the mix, you want to be doing something, get into EMS.
I really think that just inviting more kids, or maybe even more 16 to 17, when they're kind of figuring out what they want to do, just invite them into the door, and then the conversation will be rolling from there, I'm sure.
I think accessibility and approachability is really the key. The kids need to be able to know that they can approach the fire department, that it's not closed to them regardless of where they come from, that it is an open opportunity for them, and that we need to be welcoming. We truly need to just open our arms and take, give these kids the guidance that they need. We need them to, continue to staff the ranks in the organization. And it's how we support a healthy society, right?
Right. And I think this might be a conversation for another episode, but the culture of your department and how welcoming your firefighters are does play a huge role in that. And that comes down to the culture of your station, but we'll
I
save
look
that conversation for
I
another
look
time.
forward to that one. I look forward to that one. I'm in.
We have friends of the show that we can bring in for that episode.
All right. I look forward to it.
All right. But thank you for joining us today, Chief. And thank you so much to our listeners for tuning in. A link to the article we discussed can be found in the show notes of this episode. We'll see you back here next week for more Fire Headlines.